Hi, it's Hazel, and welcome to my channel, Hazel and Aka Design. You know, if you cough 3 times in the first 2 sentences of a video, it's usually a good idea to stop and regroup and try again. Let's hope this will be better. Anyway, if you are at all like me, then you may be nearing the end of your rope with all the fabric scraps that you have acquired and or saved. So before we get to some ideas that may be a little different, well, I should say, okay, first of all, I think that this will be a multi-video, like a little mini-series. And today it will basically be either a primer for beginners who aren't quite sure of the terminology, and or a reminder to more experienced people for some ideas that perhaps they've forgotten about or haven't done in a while. So hopefully that will, there will be something for everyone. And then in subsequent videos, there will be something, like I said, a little bit different that I haven't seen before. Or my spin on something. Okay, so I've put a pile of things here so that you have something to look at. Let me just shove that out of the way and begin at the beginning. Now, I have, well, hopefully by the time you've seen this, I will have listed some vintage bedding bundles in all of my sales platforms. So Etsy, Coffee, and the Maker's Market. And of course, I had acquired a lot of vintage bedding, some of it still in original packaging, never having been opened or used or worn, washed. So this is not one of those. This is something that is so old and threadbare. It actually has holes in it. But that doesn't mean that we would reject it and not find a use for it. So there's a hole right there. Anyway, I got kind of tired of passing this around, and I decided to turn it into a fabric ruffle. Now, this is a really long one because of the nature of the scrap. So basically, the way I do it, here's another one. This is also from a piece of bedding. I just love this. And I haven't plucked all the threads off. I guess, that's a matter of taste, whether or not you like the sort of the shaggy look of the stray threads or prefer a neater, more sleek look. And, well, just to show you one more, there's this one, which I really love too, because it's this dainty little floral and sort of a cream background and would look good in virtually any style of journal. Okay, so the thing that these have in common is they're all about the same width, so about 1.5 inches. Now you can make your ruffles as wide or narrow as you wish. I think it would be really quite difficult to make them much narrower than this, because as it is, it's almost like walking and chewing gum at the same time. What I do is I sort of hand position the first few pleats. I've got it on my sewing machine. I get the needle, I put the presser foot down, get the needle into the fabric, and then using a craft stick, a jumbo craft stick or a tongue depressor, I feed the folds in. And sometimes, obviously, a person has to stop and regroup. I think that they're ruffle making attachments for sewing machines. If I have one for one of my machines. I've never used it. The other thing you might be able to see is that on this one, I've used a zigzag stitch. On the other two, I've used a straight stitch. I'm so sorry about this. And basically, because it's a full-time job, filling bobbins and changing threads and bobbins, even though I have many, many bobbins pre-filled, and I have a lot of thread in a variety of colors, and I like using color. I've been doing a fair bit of sewing lately, and I thought, okay, let's pick something neutral that will work on all of these guys and, simplify my life somewhat. That doesn't mean that you can't choose a contrasting color that would really, sort of pop. So that is that. Some people prefer to do a ruffle just by doing a large stitch and basically a gathering thread. So I don't know, I did this a long time ago. You can see this lovely sheer fabric, and it's sort of ombre in color, going from a light pink to a sort of an orange. I don't know if I chose to do it that way on this particular fabric, because this would have been even harder to work with than say cotton or polycotton, because of course it's kind of slippery. But when the time comes, you just pull your basting thread and make the gathers as loose or tight as you wish. And I'll just pull that back for the time being, because I don't really know how or when I'm going to use this. So I have a couple of those done. Okay, what else have we got here? Well, another thing that you will see gazillions of videos on are fabric clusters. Now, clusters are basically relatively tiny. They are a combination, typically, of, well, basically whatever you want to put into them. The ones I'm showing you are all fabric. Now, I could have used paper in addition to these. I could have, clusters can also be all paper, no fabric. And I just want to point out a couple of things. And I just randomly grabbed a handful out of the drawer I keep these in. So, okay. This one is lovely. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 layers plus the button. And it's fairly substantial. So from one end to the other, it's about 3.5 inches. This way, about 3 inches. So there's a lot of interest going on there. There's there's a little piece of quilted fabric, there's a bit of lace, and the sheer. This one has 1, 2, 3. So basically, in this case, I drew my fabric selection from the colors in the print. Now, if you watched a number of videos on snippets, on clusters, you would notice that everybody has their own favorite thing, their own favorite color, their own favorite way of doing these. In this case, it appears that the only thing holding this together is the fact that I sewed a button on top. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. This is another one. I love this fabric so much. I think I upholstered something with it, or made cushions, because that's sort of my color. Here I just added a piece of ribbon. Now, if I was actually going to use this at some point, I'd probably make that ribbon be a little more, behave a little better. Here, I've got some very narrow little strips, and you can see why we are all losing the battle against our scraps. Because if we save something as tiny as this, there's no end. In this case, it's one piece of fabric. Now, I wish I would have ironed that so it stays a little flatter. One of those butter appliques that you can, butterfly appliques that you can find at the dollar store, and a button. And again, these all were hand sewed. So that's one category. Oh, here's another example. And of course, all these stray threads are partly coming off the pieces themselves, and also partly because they're all, they're all like sardines in a can where I store them. This one has 1, 2, 3 fabrics, and it's been hand stitched. And it's essentially a base that is ready to go. It could have something more attached to it. It could be a button, it could be... Oh, and the other thing about buttons, they don't have to be stitched on. It is obviously a lot quicker. It's a different look, but it's a lot quicker just to glue a button on. So this is probably not the right color, but, a dab of glue and it's done. Whereas with the others, here I took the trouble to use a color that coordinates. So there's that. Here I've used, what the heck did I do there? Well, I guess that's hand stitching too. And I did it on the thorax. Is that the right word? The thorax of that butterfly. This one is just a little bit of, it's just 1, 2, 3 layers. Again, some hand stitching waiting for a final embellishment. This, for some reason, I think because it was 2 shears, I sandwiched a piece of cardstock in between and sort of did some fairly wild stitching on the back. Also added, excuse me, also added a, eyelet and bulb pin. Again, this could benefit from something more. Person with this fabric that looks sort of boho-ish, a person could also add some gems or some, a few sequins or whatever, either hand sewn on, excuse me, or glued on. This is awful, I'm sorry. I've showed these in the past. This is also fabric. It's one of those souvenir tea towels. And this particular one had all of these flowers from a particular region. So I cut them out to get the most advantage, cut around the flower, tried to keep the name intact. And then, again, to make my life simpler, glued them onto a piece of cardstock so there'd be room to write at the back, and then zigzagged it around the edges just to keep it from fraying. So there's that sort of a thing. Because those souvenir tea towels, quite often they're from a country or a city, and they have decorative elements to them. Those things are often in thrift stores. People thought that they were probably buying an affordable, easy-to-pack souvenir, and then decided, well, what do I need this for? This is fabric on a paper clip. Now, in this case, I've just glued the little, I don't know if you can see, this little flap of the back fabric around this piece of the paper clip. So here I've done one of those little felt flower appliques and a button. And, it's so much fun. Well, at least I find it so much fun to work with scraps because it gives me the chance to exercise my color eye. Oh, both of these have been zigzagged. You can see I probably did these the same day, the same time. So my advice to you would be sort your scraps by color, because I think that's the well, in my opinion, that is the logical way to do any of this. You wouldn't, I don't think that you would say to yourself, okay, I'm going to only use sheer fabrics today, or I'm going to use corduroy, or I'm going to use quilting. Well, quilting cotton maybe is different, because if it was planned in such a way, they probably coordinate color-wise. So that would be my advice. And then just, lay out a bunch of them with your base fabric, which typically would be the largest piece. And then just one by one by one until you've got, 20 or so done. Just keep layering. And then figure out how you're going to attach them. Now, in a case like this, there may be, okay, no, that's not glued. So the only thing holding this together is a hope and a prayer. No, the only thing holding this together is the zigzag stitching. But that's kind of nice. Well, maybe this one is glued onto the base. I think there's something, it's tactile. It gives a person a chance to explore it further should they choose to. Now this one is quite a bit bigger. Let me just look at my mat here. So this is 8 inches long. So this could actually be put on a spine if the spine is narrow enough. It could be a belly band within the journal. It could be a flip in the journal. And you can see that I have slow stitched on it. So there's some stitches. And again, the only way that slow stitching actually is really effective if it's contrasting. So I've used white against this beautiful maroon color, red against the black and white, sewed on a variety of buttons in 2 different places, left the sort of the frayed, fringy parts, and I love it, and that's probably why it's still here, because, oh, and here's some lace. Do I want to part with it? Perhaps not. More recently, I did a video showing me making all of these using a ribbon crimper. And it was an exercise in frustration, but I also have all of these pieces done. So again, same scenario. The only thing that is different here is the method for holding it all together. So remember, you can glue them together, you can sew them together, and you can use ribbon crimpers, you can use staples. I tend not to prefer using staples, and I'm not quite sure why. And as far as the sewing goes, you can machine stitch or you can hand stitch. So let's put those aside. Now, what I have done in my little show and tell here is a long time ago, in a place far away, I did a lot of, I coffee or tea dyed a lot of these sort of natural colored, file folders. And for whatever reason, they're not right in my face, so I forget to use them. Going through my scraps, I came across this particular fabric, and I have very little of it. This is all I had, total. So it probably came in a scrap bag of some sort. So I thought, and I've also recently thrifted a package of bookmarks. Well, you know, it's anything that's in a bag. You can't very well see anything except the top one. And sometimes I think of saying, would you open that up and show it to me? And sometimes I just take a chance. So there are a number of bookmarks that aren't very attractive. So I picked a few of those out, and I decided that I would cover them with fabric. Now this could be a bookmark. It could be a belly band. It is 8.5 inches tall, so that would work in most journals. And I glued it down using my Yoo-hoo glue stick, and found that it worked very well. But we also know that it never hurts to add some stitching along the edge, and zigzagging is typically better than straight stitching. Now, all I did on the back side, and you can see it's not totally, you could read that if you had to. 7 Academy Award nominations, something winner, and the thing must have been Shine. It doesn't matter to me. I chose to use a piece of ledger, like the fact that the numbers are there, glued that on the back. And of course, this could still be further decorated. A person could glue some coordinating or matching lace down the center, create a double belly band if that's what this ends up being. It could be a side tuck, a side pocket. So it all depends on the final use. However, it is far better to have it at this stage than to have something like this going on. So I did that one. Now I have a second, not that you really need my help in figuring this out, but so here, oh, the English Patient. So that kind of tells you how old this is, I guess. 1997. I glued some more, I glued file folder to it. And one of these pieces, is it this one, is big enough to cover it. And then these others, I just tried to sort of, you know, square them off a bit so that if I keep them all together, you know, maybe put a stick pin through them or something, they at least look like they could be, you know, somewhat the right shape for making clusters. So again, how much further ahead am I? I'm not. I'm not entirely sure. But I will show you what I do, even though, like I said, you don't really need my help in gluing. Now, I basically trimmed this to about the size that I need, and that's how I ended up with some of those smaller pieces. Again, I just slather as much of this on as I can reasonably do, trying to get pretty right to the edge. It seems like my gluing has improved since I'm worrying less about getting it on my plastic protector here. Now, if I was ready, mind you, I could use this, I guess. I should have had a wet one ready to go, because sometimes it isn't a good idea to put the good side of something into the glue. Now, this fabric looks pretty darn good on both sides. However, this side looks slightly better. So maybe just to make sure that I've positioned it and got it all on, I'm going to do this from the back side. Now, I am really quite amazed at how well this glue works. And the beauty of it is that it's not going to especially in a case like this. It's not going to bleed through to the front. So what I will do, and a lot of what we do, I think, is actually a test of our patience. So as tempting as it would be to just quickly trim this, I am not going to do that. Oh, and there was one thing I wanted to say. Check and double check for threads. Now, that was a loose one, but they're called, this one here that's still attached could have also folded back on itself. Is it going to materially change how this turns out? No, but it's darn annoying. As I was smoothing it, I could feel a little lump there. So, and I was able to remove it, so I'm happy with that. So, if I was just here by myself, I'd probably just slip it under here just so it stays relatively flat. Obviously, there's no additional weight being added to it, but that's all right. Then I had another piece of fabric, and there was another part to this design, but I cut off the two sides. Oh, it was this, I think. I don't like that together. So, but I like this. And then in a subsequent video, you will see that that I have quite a few pieces of this lovely striped sheer fabric. And I wanted to use it up while it was here. So basically I thought, and again, sometimes, not always, I can be over the top. A lot of times, I just like the simplicity of something. I should also tell you that where I'm one of those people that doesn't mind ironing. In fact, I find it a Zen meditative process. And especially if you do it in silence, like don't have, the TV or whatever on. It's surprising how repetitive and mindless jobs like that, hand washing dishes would be another example, get the old gears spinning. And quite often, if you've been, considering a dilemma, maybe trying to make a decision about something, you find that it comes to you. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to do here yet. I mean, what method of attachment. But then I thought, well, okay, I have this roll of sari fabric that I bought in this, or I think I got as a gift, in this lovely color. Why don't I add that to it? I think that works. I also had a quick look at some buttons. And I think I picked the buttons before so these are shell buttons. I recently thrifted a whole bunch of them. And it almost seems like somebody wrapped this copper around each one. So I could, now let's see how this works with the sari. Does it work just as well? I could do that in some sort of, an artsy-fartsy arrangement. I could use a statement button like that. And I really like this one because it's such a good match to that background color there. But, you always want to have your options open. So I thought that could work as well. Not quite as good, but, no one's going to run you out of town if you use that one. And then I picked that one as well. It's kind of variegated, or maybe it is faded, I don't know. And that would also work. Or I could go totally wild and, use all three. Probably wouldn't do that. Now, this could be, again, it's three very simple layers. I don't think I would iron this flat because that's part of the charm of the sari. So I haven't threaded a needle, although I probably have one here. So I think all I'll do in this case, I should not make this so zigzaggy here. I think what I'll do is just put a pin on it, put a pin in it, and you know that at some point this is ready. I've done the pre-selection, and this is ready to sew together or, attach in whatever way I choose. I wouldn't, in this case, probably choose glue because it's bound to stain this sari. I could, I suppose. Well, maybe I should just do that since I never do it. Can I find my little time? Well, maybe I should use a bigger one since it's wider. I was going to look for my little stapler, but I think I'll just probably staple this. And I will do it. Stapling isn't ideal in this case because this is pretty wide. This is nearly 4 inches wide. So yes, a staple. Maybe I'll compromise here and I'll do 2. But because I don't normally consider a staple a finished edge, I would probably be inclined to cover that up. So because I have so much of this sari, I guess what I could do is I could get another piece of it. Oh boy, that's not very straight, is it? Run it across the top like a header, and then probably do that. Now this button is so big it almost covers both staples, but not quite. So again, I will leave that for another time to make the final decision. Sometimes when you're looking at fabric, and depending, oh, you know what? I totally forgot what I was, let's backtrack. Let's remove these. On my desk here, I have had this. This was around the neck of some garment. So you can see I did an admirable job of cutting it off. Ha. These are all glued on. They're not sewn, they're glued on. Anyway, I thought, hey, that fabric, whoops, I didn't get the second staple on. That fabric looks absolutely great with this. Now again, that was before the sari, but I don't think it's going to change the equation. So I had initially just laid it down on here, and this is a double thickness, which sometimes with tulle, that's exactly what you need so that it's even visible, because sometimes one layer just doesn't make any impact. But see how good that looks? So what I thought I would do is cut along. This is so wiggly jiggly. Cut along the seam allowance. Oh, you know what? I probably should have left. Is that still attached? Oh, saved by the bell. Since I would be using it the long way, it makes sense to leave that together. Oh my goodness. And again, kind of jaggedy. It doesn't really matter because I can continue to adjust that until I am, and maybe I would want to, stagger these two ends so they don't look quite so matchy-matchy. So in fact, it looks like another layer and not just... So let's try to get this to stay where it belongs. Maybe I would cut the top one a wee bit shorter. And I can still use this. And because, you know, 3 out of 4 layers are pretty sheer, pretty lightweight, it's not adding a great deal of bulk to a journal eventually. So I will put that aside, and then I can throw... Can I really? Can I throw this away? I can throw all this away and pretend that I never even had it. You know, as I was showing you the ruffles and you saw me pulling thread, another thing, if you're a beginner, maybe you didn't realize that you should be starting a gigantic container and saving these threads to either add as another element on your clusters or anywhere else that you're decorating. So you can see that there's contrast between that and the sari, and that's what makes it, you know, so effective. And I'm, you know, obviously I'm pulling your leg, I'm pulling your chain. You can throw all of these things out and you'll still have quality of life. Or you can save a whole bunch of them in a variety of colors in a great big thing, and you'll have them at your fingertips if you can find them when you need them. Totally your call. This is another snippet in the making. Same sheer. This is nice by itself. I just didn't think it was that great together. And I'm leaving it as is, because if I find a third element that really looks wonderful, you know, maybe that corally color, I'd probably trim this a little shorter so you sort of get that petticoat effect. But for the time being, this looks like there's a plan. I'll show you 2 more things and we'll call this a video. Okay, you can tell that this is a vintage sheet and it's never been washed. I cut the tag off not so long ago. It had never been through a washing machine. It still has its sizing and it's still fairly crisp. So what I did, and you can see, I cut this off here. Now, if you can see this whole piece, you can see that this end is wider than this end. Because, let's face it, a lot of these things are made in factories with, you know, poorly paid employees, perhaps even in sweatshops. This would have been, you know, way back in the day when people were less cognizant of that. So it's not surprising that this thing is not perfectly straight. Let's face it, by finding the square, you know, the warp and the weft, and getting it all perfect the way you would if you were making a top-notch garment for yourself, there would be some waste. This way, if it looks close enough, then you end up with something like this when you rip it. Now, presumably, the ripped line here is the straight line. And we know that because, well, I know that I remember in home ec we were taught, how do you find the straight? Well, you pull a thread. So that is a straight line. So we know that this hem side is definitely crooked. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, this end and this end are the same width. It didn't start going crooked till after that. This is also 5 inches wide. We know that this is a good pocket size. So I would be kind of remiss if I cut that finished edge off or took out the stitching or wasted the fact that it's already been hemmed and it's stronger, it's thicker. So I would use it as is, as a pocket. And we know that there's some rigidity to this because it is, 2.5 layers of fabric and it's sewn and so on. So that's why this is left as it is. And again, that doesn't mean it's ready to go. An applique could be added to it, a lace border, ribbon, you name it. We're not talking about decorating. We're talking about how to get the most out of your fabric scraps. So we throw that one aside. But what about this? Well, I was tempted to, painstakingly take out those stitches. But then I thought, okay, what advantage am I going to have? It will still be crooked. It'll just be wider. So I thought that what I would do, okay, and I would, obviously this only works it works better if you go to the narrow end. So I'm going to make a little slit and I'm going to tear. And you should be forewarned if you've never torn fabric, is that sometimes it doesn't tear, no matter what you do. So be prepared that that might happen. Also, typically, if I was aiming for a particular thing, maybe I wanted it to be a pocket or something, I would, in the spirit of measure twice and cut once, I would tear it bigger than I think I need it, simply because if it goes crooked, because you don't know that until you do your first tear. If it were to go crooked, at least I haven't ruined whatever. Now, at this point, I can decide what to do with this. I could, and I think I have, use something like this, even if it's lopsided. So, 1/2 inch there and 1 inch there. Maybe over 8 inches. How much is 8 inches? Up to here. So let's pretend. So if I cut it at the 8-inch mark, I could glue this onto the side of a page and it would be okay. I could use the part that's more even and glue it to the side of a page. I could take the stitching out. Okay, it starts to get obviously narrower about there. So maybe around here, I take it apart, I take the stitching apart, and I end up with a piece that's, almost twice as wide. So you have options. And again, it depends on the style in which you're working. If you're working in sort of a grungy, shabby, more junk journal-y type project, then you could glue this whole lopsided thing on there, and so what? It'll fit right in. And it depends on your personal threshold for how much of this kind of stuff you can stomach. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Now with this piece, it's 2 inches wide. I would say it is probably a bit wide for a fabric ruffle, but again, some people do it. So again, this is how I would start. Of course, I'd be sitting at the machine, and it'll be, it would be nice. But I also think that maybe these stylized flowers here are the hero of the day, and maybe there's a better way to use this. So maybe, again, this gets backed onto something. You don't need to make every single decision right now, but I would suggest that if you have things like this, keep them together. Because that way, if you're working on a project and you can have a repeating element, if you have something, whatever it is, color, material, like a supply, whether it's paper or fabric, whatever, if you have some element repeating itself a few times, then it looks cohesive. So I would probably, maybe I should put a pin in it, keep all of these things together. And again, it just, did I really use up very much? No, not in this particular video, because it's more been a show and tell than an actual construction site. But everything looks neater than it did before and easier to store. If this is now dry enough to cut, what I would typically do, now I would not usually use such a short blade on my scissors because that's just slow, but these are nice sharp little fabric scissors, so naturally you cut it from the back side against that thicker edge, and then you add this to your sewing pile. And if possible, you either look at everything on your sewing pile and think, okay, if I go with a taupe or a gray thread, it'll work with just about all these things. And do that. And you save time, like I said, threading, filling bobbins, and threading and rethreading your machine. This guy folded back on itself. If not, then group your sewing into colorway piles. Put all the pinks together, put all the greens together, put all the blacks or whites or whatever colors you have. And then you're going at it in a more organized and systematic and efficient way. That is all I have for you today, but keep your eye peeled for the other videos in this series, because I think there will be, again, as I've said, some new information possibly for brand new people, and some reminders for, or another take for more experienced people to consider. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here. And if you haven't seen, let me just end on this. You've probably heard of the channel 49 Dragonflies. That's Barbara from Austria. And I saw the video today. I don't know when she posted it. And the title does seem a bit like clickbait, but it's not. But the real message, which is why YouTube channels are dying, isn't that a lovely thought? You know, she does say that the reason you clicked on this video will come towards the end of the video, and she does a timestamp. You know, I guess either hoping that it's shrewd, let's put it that way. It's shrewd to put important information at the end of the video, because obviously viewing time counts in YouTube algorithms. Anyway, I think she spoke clearly for herself, but also for all of us that have YouTube channels, in that YouTube measures engagement and interaction. So even though we all sound like broken records, and you've heard it 3 million times, when a YouTube channel host says to you, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and write a comment, that's because those are the very things that YouTube measures. And it results in standings, and how often they suggest your channel, how hard they push your channel, which of course we all want to be seen. We're not doing this to remain in the shadows. We're doing this to get noticed and get recognized and have more people to like and tune into our content. So basically, and at that, I haven't watched her for quite a while. I noticed, and of course, like a million, I think she had something like maybe 1,200 comments on that video. And I noticed that her subscriber numbers are now over 68,000. And I said in my comment that it's hard to believe that somebody with more than 68,000 subscribers has the very same challenges as someone like me who just crossed my 1,000 subscriber threshold. And I also said something to the effect that, you know, I wonder if she remembers how hard it was to get to those first 1,000 subscribers, and basically thanked her for saying what is on everyone's mind. And of course, I know that quite often I'm watching YouTube videos on a smart TV, which of course doesn't allow you to make comments. So it's a matter of, you know, remembering, caring enough, and adding an extra step by going back to that video next time you're on your phone or your laptop and doing the thumbs up and the like and so on then. So again, I guess we'll all keep saying please like, subscribe, and comment, because really that is the name of the game. We may not like it, you may not like it, but as she said, it allows channel operators, channel creators to keep on keeping on and doing, making content with the faint hope that someone out there in TV land, in YouTube land, will see it, like it, appreciate it. So again, at the risk of beating a dead horse, that is the message. And if you're so inclined, and she had something ridiculous, like maybe 15,000 views, which must have just thrown the algorithms into a tizzy. But, you know, listen to it. And she has her way of explaining it. I have my way of explaining it, but the message is the same. We're doing this for you. We're asking that you do that for us. Anyway, I'm going to stop there because I have more videos to make. Okay, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Bye.